You know, it's the first day of spring and my boots were feeling really heavy. You know, you gotta let go a little. It's so good to be with all of you. So, if you're gonna, just in your own mind, how would you separate work and play? Like, why is play different than work and work different than play? Just sort of an interesting inquiry of when am I working and when am I playing? And as I was thinking about it, I decided my answers weren't good enough, so I had to Google it. And Google always has different perspectives, but it basically came down to one really clear answer, which is work is something you have to do, and play is a choice. You can walk away from it at any point. You can show up or not show up. Play is fun because you don't have to do it. You're only there because you want to be there. And work, you have to be there. Even when you don't want to be there, it's tiring, other things are going on, you still have to show up. You still have to show up to these tasks. And so we need rest from work, but not from play, because play we can walk away from. We need rest because the have to can get overwhelming. So this month we've been talking a lot about play. And it was great. I do a Zoom call with my 3 older brothers and my mom on Saturdays, and I was late yesterday. So as I got on, they were in a full-on dialogue about games. I don't know how they got onto the topic of games, but all the games we used to play and who was good at what, blah, blah, blah. And so, it was a really fun, it was both physical games, sports, as well as board games. And it was really nice because I got a lot of validation then from my brothers. Oh, you were always really good athlete. You were good at games. You were good at that game. And so it felt really good. And then, so my oldest brother, his niece, my niece, his daughter, is getting married at the end of May. And it's going to be a weekend in the Poconos with my whole family and her husband's family. And they said, oh yeah, it's going to be lots of games. So it was funny because I loved getting all the compliments. But then I'm like, oh no, now I'm going to see them and we're going to have to play these games. and so I'm like, oh, I got to be good now. And the pressure, like suddenly what seemed like really fun and joyful. And I woke up this morning, I'm like, oh, I got to start playing Spit with Julian every day. I got to get on my game. Like I got to win if I'm going to go, or at least play decently now. And so suddenly the ego got involved. And so that's what can happen with games too, even play, and especially as adults. See, I think playing, we associate with children because they can just shake it off. I remember when Julian played baseball as a kid, and they would lose, and he didn't seem at all upset. And I'm like, aren't you upset? No, why? Like it just didn't, and I recognize that's like a developmental thing, that as we get older and our identity gets hooked into what we are doing, that's when play starts to get very serious. And that's when the parents kick in and they get really serious because it's their identity if their kid doesn't play well. So it's an interesting thing about play. It's not just playing a game. It's our identity with it. And so what can happen is, so how do we shift that? Because if you play anything, think of things that you like to do. If you play it and do it well enough, you want to be good at it. You do want to excel at it. So my brother gave this wonderful example of how he coached. He was a soccer coach. He has 4 kids. His oldest is a daughter. She played soccer for years, but then she had multiple concussions, so she couldn't play. He coached he has triplet sons. So from U10 all the way up through high school, he was their soccer coach. And he said, my philosophy was not to have them be on a winning team. My philosophy was I really wanted to teach them soccer. I wanted them to know and master the game of soccer and the fundamentals. So what he said I told them, and many of the parents were not happy to hear this, was I don't care if we win games or not. That's not my goal. My goal is to develop your kids as really good soccer players, and that means we're going to lose a lot because to learn the fundamentals, they're going to just constant, like one of the things you have to, I don't know, but yet kick back towards the goal. Well, the goalie's going to miss it, and they're going to score a goal for the other team. Or just he's teaching them basic skills of how to play. So he lives in Newton, which is a suburb of Boston in the state of Massachusetts. So just in this one little suburb, they were like the third from the bottom in terms of soccer team. They did lose. And a lot of the parents didn't like it because they wanted their kids to win. So the parents who kept their kids on the team were also bought into the idea that my kids are here to learn how to master soccer and not to win games. And as my brother coached them through middle school, they were still learning, and come high school, they start winning their games, and then their junior and senior year, they won the state championship in Massachusetts. They mastered soccer, and they only got to that mastery because they had to be willing to fail for several years and look bad. So if your identity was caught up in about winning more than mastery, that's when we get hooked. Because even if they had, we know the end of the result is great, they won the state championship, but even if they hadn't won the state championship, they had mastered soccer. And as they go on in their life, they're not going around telling everybody, I won a state championship, but they're walking around with that confidence of, I know soccer, I've mastered a skill, and they all continue to play because they know they have this game. They know how to play it. It's in them. There's a level of mastery. And let me ask you, when you think of anything in your life that you've mastered, doesn't it feel good? Don't you feel great about those things that you've mastered? There's a certain level of alignment with who you really are by mastering. Did you have to work to master? And my answer to that would be, I don't want to answer for other people, but yeah, you have to work, but it doesn't feel like work. And that's the part I want to get to, because we're talking about rest. And when we are in alignment with something that our soul cares about, that I think anything, it doesn't matter what it is, if we want to master it, we've taken it to another level where it's not about win or lose or being better than other people, it's about my own level of mastery. And that's going to bring a joy to it. So whether we call it work or play, we don't have to make those categories anymore. If mastery is the intention, whatever we're doing starts to bring joy. You think so? I think that. So just looking at this idea of mastery. I'll rest when I'm dead. So the intention of the talk, of the writing was that we love to be busy, and that we have this thing, I'll rest when I'm dead, like as a brownie point, like look how busy I am. But the idea is that rest is important and inherent all along the way. And we don't have to wait till we're dead. Rest is part of play. And what I'm trying to say is yes, and what are we resting from? Why do we need rest? Because it captured my attention years ago when I read in Shunryu Suzuki's book that it's the ego that needs rest. That in fact, spirit never needs rest. Spirit is infinite, unending energy, joy, bliss, harmony, vitality, strength. It doesn't need rest. That's a human egoic need. So I was thinking about that because we've started on Tuesday nights the Testimony of Light book group. And I don't know if you've ever, have you ever read a book about a place? Like let's say you read about Paris, or you even seen movies with Paris, and then you go to Paris and you're like, oh, like now you're experiencing Paris. It's totally different than what you read about, only because you're having your own personal relationship with it, your own experience. And then you go home back to the States, and even if you go back and see the old movie or read a book, you're like, oh yeah, I was there. Like now it's all infused with your own personal experience. And that's what Testimony of Light's been like for me. I read it years ago. I loved it. Testimony of Light, for those of you who don't know, I apologize for not describing it. Testimony of Light is a book about a former Anglican nun who then starts doing psychic connections with her friend on this plane. So when she dies, she goes to the other side of the veil and psychically connects with her friend. So this is Frances Banks, who goes to the other side, and is explaining what the other side of the veil is like. And it's wonderful. I tend to be a skeptic, but as I read it, I think as most of us read it, it's like, oh, this makes sense. And even my skepticism as I'm going along, maybe not, there's no way just to keep going as she gets more and more into the light, and you're like, because you feel it in yourself, that light resonance. So that's the way I've described it to people. It's maybe a little slow at the beginning, but if you keep reading, you get to the light. Well, last week I was behind on my reading, I admit. So it's Tuesday, and I'm just reading it like the catch up on the assignment, and I'm sort of shocked. I'm like, oh my gosh, this was so much like my experience. So in 2019, I had an aneurysm, a slow bleeding aneurysm, and so I went and got surgery. But prior to that experience, I had had 2 dreams and another sign that this was happening, so I was ready for it. It wasn't, sometimes there's a difference when things happen suddenly and you're not ready for it. You sort of trying to catch up and you're disoriented, but I was sort of prepared. So as it was happening, I was moving along with it. And so I was able to, I didn't have any near-death experience. My body was still working, but I was able to consciously move into my energy body. And when we know the physical body is very dense, energy body is very light. So all the prayers that I could see the prayers. That's why I'm just like loving the whole prayers, because I just saw the prayers working. And because I was in my energy body, it really works faster and clearer. And so I was moved into this realm, and it was very much a feeling of ascension. And I was with a being. And the most pronounced thing, so here's the first thing about rest, was how completely loved I was, and there was no judgment. One of the things, Frances Banks is the nun who's on the other side of the veil, she talks about when she first goes over, adjusting to the fact that there's not all this noise. Like we get used to all the noise around us and the visual stimulants, that there wasn't as much sensory input. It's like we have to adjust, and the same thing is with judgment. I don't think we can ever, as human beings, let go of judgment totally. But we can sure lessen it, just like we can lessen the noise input and the visual input, because it was an amazing experience to experience no judgment. Like it was sort of, I was aware of being surprised, like, wow, I'm like not judged at all, like for anything ever. Like it was crazy. And it was a moment of rest. That's what true rest is. See, the ego wants rest from feeling less than, not worthy. It could even be rest. You've tried really hard and you achieved a goal and you're tired and you want to, if you have a goal to run a marathon, you might need physical rest. But in general, why we want rest is because we're constantly judging everything all the time. It's a constant, and I don't even know if sometimes it's very obvious and sometimes it's not so obvious. It's back in our subconscious mind, but and it's just like, calm down, relax. The soul needs rest. The way the ego often gets rest is not just by sleep, it's by forgetting. So when we talk about vacations, a lot of times it's just great to get away. I didn't have to think about all those things anymore. Our mind is going, it's a way of not thinking, and it is. It's wonderful. But it's also, we get rest, and I thought of this only because I thought of a person that I knew who's sort of always in this energetic joy, and I recognized the reason why they felt that way is because they always felt better than everybody. And as long as they felt better than everybody, their ego was feeling pretty good and they were energized. The moment that ego was threatened, they would get very agitated and they would have to sort of they'd have to sort of conquer the person because that was going to upset their equilibrium. That was an egoic equilibrium. That was an egoic rest. It wasn't an authentic rest. So what I want to really bring home in this idea of Soul rest is really working with non-judgment. That means a lot of forgiveness all the time for ourselves first and foremost. When I was in that place, it wasn't like I was worried about other people's problems. It's like I was suddenly aware of all my infractions of being a human being, and so amazed that didn't seem to even register. It was just love. It was just love. And so self-forgiveness, compassion, discernment, the other side of the veil, as we're reading in Testimony of Light, it's very organized. The people who are vibrating low are in a different place, who can't handle that much love. And then there's people who can handle a lot more love, and they're at a higher place. And it's a much more complicated world than sometimes we attribute to it. But it's all there's boundaries, there's places. So we still want to have discernment on this side of the veil. No judgment doesn't mean not discernment. It doesn't mean not having wisdom. But it does mean living with an open heart towards ourselves and towards others. There's rest in that, where we don't have to be better than people. We're not less than people. There's just love. In fact, that was one of the things this presence was telling me, was there's no comparison because there is no other. Like, the idea of other is such an illusion, and it was saying there's no other, just love. There's nothing, you can't be better or worse because that doesn't exist, because there is no other. And I was thinking about that, sort of a side train, but one of the, no, I don't want to go there. So the other thing that happens, so she's experiencing this non-judgment, and then there's the looking at your life. And she said a lot of people need rest, and it's rest in love, before they can even look at their lives, because what happens is we judge. And this was a funny experience for me, because, again, reading it, she goes, well, they bring out two blueprints. The first blueprint is the ideal that you came into this world with, and the second blueprint is what you actually did. And I'm like, that would be horrible. Like, it's like all the stuff you failed at, and like, how is that any fun? and so, remember I was talking about the ideal and the actual. So here's our ideals when we have high expectations, and then here's the actual, and then suffering is the gap in between. So that was like, oh my gosh, that's what they're doing when you're in love, like showing you all the places where you didn't reach your ideals. The interesting thing was, when I was reading it this time, I didn't have that experience at all, because that's actually is what I experienced. So being in this love, I looked at myself, and I was very clear that I was disappointed with myself, with what I did not do. And I'm very clear, if I was fully dead, I'd be reincarnated and come back, because it was upsetting enough, like, no, I haven't done this, and I really, really want to do this. Be this, do this. It's both. It's not either or, it's both. Be and do. And I haven't done it, and I haven't been it, and I haven't done it. And I was so relieved, I felt so loved that I wasn't going to be stopped from going back to earth. But it all came from me. It wasn't anybody, there was no judgment, there was no suffering in that gap. There was just, all came from this place of love. Like, I only want to go back. I only want to to get closer to that ideal because I want to. It was my choice. I want to do that. And so I'm saying that for all of us, that we all have this soul call, and that we know what it is. I think that was the other thing that struck me. Is like, I knew this all the time when I was there. But there's so many layers when we get on earth that get put on, that are around us, in our family, in our culture, in our world. There's all these ideas that we start taking on, that it's not that we forget it, it's just that there's so many other things we have to do, so many other things to take care of. And that's, in the Merton's reading today, he was saying, the things that we think are important turn out not to be important, and the things that we think are play are actually, or light and joyful, are actually the reason why we're here, but we forget about that because it's not serious. And I'm not, what we call serious and what we call play, I don't want to confuse it with that. What I'm saying is that every single being on this planet came onto this planet with a purpose, a soul purpose that you created, that came from you. You're here not because someone's making you. You're here to fulfill your purpose, not because you're a bad or a good person, or you should or you shouldn't to have to, but because you want to. Just like mastering soccer was a want to. It wasn't about winning at soccer. It wasn't about being better than other people. It was this desire, this soul desire to master something. That's why you're here, because you want to be here. You want to master something. And what I believe to the depth of my being is that we all know it naturally, and we know it's almost so obvious that we don't even notice it. All the stuff in the world gets put on top of it, but we know it. And you've known it since you were a child. You've known it. You are here for a purpose. And we are here to master that purpose. And I say that because that's also where rest comes. Like I was saying, when we're mastering something, you might be working, you might be playing, it overlaps. You can't really tell which you're doing because you're so full of a soul intention. And the moment you're in your soul intention of mastery, you'll do whatever you can for it to be fulfilled. And sometimes that's hard work, and sometimes it's play. You know, I think of anything that's volunteer, and I just thought of it when I came here this morning. All the people that are here this morning who are volunteering, you know, the tech people, our practitioners, music people, all the people are coming to be of service, to give. Why? They're not getting paid the big bucks. And it's a have to, like, practitioners, this is your schedule, show up. Technicians, this is your schedule, show up. There's a have to. Why? If it's not play, and I don't have to do it for a job to make money, why would I show up to a have to? Because it's part of our soul mastery. It's part of why we are on this planet Earth. We have to show up from our soul's perspective, just like those kids playing soccer don't have to play soccer to fulfill paying bills when they get older. It's not serious business, and yet it's serious business. That level of mastery is serious business. And so we have to get clear the difference between the things we do to survive or to pay bills and that which we are here to master in our soul. Because that is serious business, whatever that is. And to get in tune with it. But there's another really forgiving part in this that I like as well. So Francis Banks talks about various stories, and a scientist and a doctor. But what's interesting about Francis Banks' story, and not to give it away, but I'm giving it away, because you can read the book many times, it doesn't matter. It's clear that so much of her journey, even though she was very involved and passionate and doing a lot of work on this earth and knew what she was interested in, it's clear on the other side she's still finding her soul purpose. And I have to say that because people say, I don't know what my soul purpose is. This ideal that we have, I don't think it's like, I think for most of us, there is a constant sort of looking around, feeling it out, trying different things. So she was interested, and we're interested in a lot of different things. I would have loved to have been a writer. And for a long time, I wanted my soul purpose to be being a writer. And I take writing classes, and I started to discover something that was a real problem. That when I was in classes with real writers, people who have that soul call, they love words and language. And I'm like, oh yeah, I just want to get rid of that part. I just want to get, like, oh, that's a big problem with being a writer. So when I'm around people who are so good at words and language and creating, I'm in awe, and there's a little part of me that's envious. And I love being around people who are writers because of their gift of language. But that's not my soul purpose. And I'm continuing, so where I am right now, along with Francis, with maybe many of you, is when I came back and I started doing from the aneurysm, and started doing sort of what I had been doing previously, and then COVID hit, and there's been this sort of back and forth with in place, shelter in place, and being in form. But I started to notice, I'm like, wow, I'm just continuing doing what I've always done, and I'm still not fulfilling my soul purpose, but I don't know how. It's not like it's like this, here's your path, and here's all the little steps. I have to feel it into it. So I'm sort of, I've told our board, I'm just withdrawing a little bit to hear, like, not how do I do this even more? Like, where can I grow? Because we're infinite beings, and I have a lot more left I want to do here, but I'm not quite sure how to do it. I know the prayer ministry is a big part of that. But it's listening. We don't always know the answers, but it's the willingness, and it's the trying, and it's the efforting, and giving ourselves over to it. So I'm inviting you to really be in the question without worrying about failing. We go back to the soccer about losing. It doesn't matter. You go to the other side of the veil, all that efforting that you gave, whether it was in the right soul group or not right soul group, it doesn't matter. Your heart, you are giving yourself to an idea or a longing that is bigger than yourself. Frances was always serving something that was bigger than herself, and her journey on the other side of the veil is to continue to discover who she really is. It's not done on earth. You don't find the final answer here. This is a part of the answer. We're part of this puzzle, this journey. That's part of the rest. Take the pressure off. You can fail. You might not know what your purpose is. There's people like Tim and Jack. Like, I see him, and like Jack knows he's here to do music. There's just no question, and he's known it since he was a kid. And I always was jealous of those kids. Like, they know what they're here to do, and they do it, and they love it, and they just keep getting better at it and better at it. There's some of us where it's a little more vague. It doesn't matter. Give yourself to as much as you can what your purpose is. So no judgment, work on no judgment, muting it a little bit, letting it die down. Keep asking and discovering and playing with what your soul purpose is. And by the way, on a whole nother, in terms of the blueprint, one of the things that I told you that I was asked to do was to write my autobiography. And I realized that was a version of the blueprint. Like, I went through my life, and I was doing a lot of, and I've heard so many people who've written autobiographies say this. It's like it's incredible healing to go through your life. And so you don't have to wait till you're on the other side of the veil. You can do it now. Every person can write their own autobiography as a life review, because it is part of understanding who we've been, where we've been, our feelings. And one of the things they said in the Testimony of Light is that it was very slow, like they really spend a lot of time at each thing. You really have to take it in. I think 12-step groups do a lot of, reevaluating your life. It's an incredible gift to yourself. Go through your life, get to know your story, get to know your journey. And then lastly, along with You've Got a Friend, the thing that was very evident to me when I was on the other side was not only how loved I was, but this presence. I was coming up with my own answers, but there was a presence that was right there by my side. Like, it wasn't like I was by myself. Nobody was giving me an answer, and yet this presence was just pure love being with me. And that's what comes through in Testimony of Light as well, that there's these healing light beings who just sit with people as they're going through their journey on this, as they're adjusting to this new world and figuring out where they are and what they're going. All along the way, there's these beings who are with them, who are walking with them. And then Frances talks about she's aware of higher beings, but she can't yet see them yet. She can feel sometimes their pull up, but she can't fully accept them, but she experiences soul groups. And this was an interesting experience as well. This book has been amazing because it's articulating what I experienced. After this experience of, I want to go back, blah, blah, then it was like I was in a council, I was with a group of beings, and we were in a really good discussion, and then I was yanked out back into my bed. Where's Jack? And then I was reading in December about in the Torah, they have this divine council. And I'm like, that's what it was. It was like a council. It was like a divine council. That's exactly. And then as I'm reading Testimony of Light, the soul groups. Yeah, there's like these groups. And they're talking. And so I'm saying all of that because one of the things that creates hell, creates pain, creates suffering is the feeling that we're on this journey alone. And we have a community of people that are here to support you and to support each other. We have practitioners who are here to support you, to walk with you, to be that light, to sit with you while you're going through challenges or making life decisions. Coaches, you might find therapists. There's all sorts of beings who can be with you. But I also want to say there are beings on the other side of the veil. And one of the things that typifies people who are in the darker realms is they can't see and know that they are surrounded by love the whole time. They can't see it because they're in this darkness. It's here. Every single one of us, when we had our soul call that we created to be on this earth, with that comes a whole council of beings, a divine soul group that is right with all 7 billion souls that are on this planet. And all the animals, I'm guessing, too. That hasn't been my own personal understanding. I don't know, but I'm guessing. But I know for at least the human beings, we all have a council, a soul group that is with us every step of the way, that is helping us, that is healing us when we are, but we have to be open to it. We have to keep saying yes to it. We have to allow, and it's got to be a higher vibration, not equal vibration, a higher vibration that is pulling us up, that is holding us and caring for us as we walk through this journey of light. That's also part of the rest, because rest doesn't feel restful if you're always by yourself and isolated. That also feels exhausting and tiring. What energizes us is to be with other people, to feel that love and that light and that support. And that's why spiritual community all over this planet, all the different spiritual communities that exist are so important, because we need each other on this spiritual journey that comes through so strongly in Testimony of Light. Community, but even the doctors had it. They had their community, the scientists, like every group, they had their people that support them. You have your people. Those are careers, by the way. Your sole purpose may not be a career, or it might be a little bit more abstract than that. That's why it's harder to find it. But whatever it is, as you're exploring it, you are not alone. So every one of us here can practice non-judgment as much as we can, forgiveness for ourselves, forgiveness for ourselves, forgiveness for ourselves, forgiveness for ourselves, regularly and consistently throughout the day. We can explore what our soul purpose is, to live for something higher than ourselves, and sometimes we know we're right on it, but the idea is mastery. Whatever you're doing in your world today, and you like doing it, mastery. That is when play and work get integrated, and we need less rest because we're so focused on mastery. Forgiveness, mastery, and you're surrounded by people who love you and support you on this side of the plane and on the other side of the plane, but you have to invite it in and welcome it. And in that place, we know what real rest is. We don't need to run anywhere because it's right where we are in this moment. Yeah? All right, let's pray. And how wonderful it is just simply to be. To remember that right in this beingness is the peace of pure spirit, the peace that passes all human understanding, the peace that doesn't need anything to be different. That just as we are, each and every one of us, just as we are in this moment, we are completely, unconditionally loved. So let's our hearts open and soften and let this love in. I invite us all just to let the love in our heart. We don't have to be better than anybody. We don't have to be worse than anybody, just as we are, with all of our strengths and all of our weaknesses, just as we are. We are loved. We are loved by a presence that knows us better than we know ourselves. It knows who we really are. It knows every experience we've ever had. It knows every thought we've ever had, those thoughts we call as good, and those thoughts we might not like so much. Those actions that we think are good and those actions we don't like so much. All of it. All of the memories, things that we've given and received, up and down, right and left, all of it. Every bit of us in our subconscious mind, those things that are hiding away in our subconscious mind, this presence knows. This presence knows. There's nothing to be hidden from this presence. It knows everything. Everything. And we are loved. Breathe that in. We are loved. We are loved. And it is from this love and as this love that we know perfect healing. We feel the light that is always there, surrounding and enfolding each and every one of us. And as we know this for ourselves, we know this for our brothers and sisters on this planet. For they are us and we are them. And so we see that presence and that love everywhere we look. And those places and beings in whom there is the confusion of separation, who may be hurting other human beings because they don't remember who they are, that in fact they are hurting themselves when they hurt others. We are that place of light and love, that presence of love, unwavering, unshakable love. We hear the voices of those people who feel invisible, who are crying out into the wilderness. It feels to them, we are love. We hold and know that though we humanly can't know what's happening or what's best, we can know love. We know love as we hold each and every individual in their soul's purpose to be fulfilled and to be remembered as much as possible and strived for. And it's not about success. It's just simply that heart's longing to fill our soul. We hold and know this is the deepest love longing of every 7 billion person on this planet, every animal, and perhaps even the plants, the living earth, the vibration of this earth. And what a gift it is to be that wonderful space of love for ourselves and for other people and for other life, all sentient life form. How wonderful it is to answer our call. That when we love, we know we are answering our call. When we are standing in whatever that soul call is for us, we are answering that call. We are here to be the fulfillment of that to the degree that we can be. We say yes. We allow this healing light to heal our physical bodies, our emotional bodies, our mental bodies. We allow this light to heal every aspect of our being. For we are the eternal light right here and right now. We are that place that allows the awareness to be that there is no death, that there is only eternal life, and we stand in that eternal light and that life here and now, and that we are in eternal rest all of the time as we stand in the eternal light. And so for the joy of that light, for the freedom of that light, for the protection of that light, for the fulfillment of that light, we just say thank you, thank you, thank you, God. And in deep abiding peace and everlasting joy, we let this word be as we say together, and so it is. Amen and amen.